Hello, this is Lisa LeRose here on Connect to Love on PRNFM, and I am blessed that Michael J. Russ is joining me today. I want to just welcome you, Michael, and then get into the meat and potatoes of everything that we want to discuss in today's show. So welcome.
Absolutely. We're going to make a great stew today with those meat and potatoes.
Yeah, put some carrots in there. And who knows what else.
It's awesome to be here. Always amazing.
Welcome. Yeah, so we're doing a series all about self-love and recognizing that you are enough. And one of the things that I came across, and it's a wonderful little poem written by Nikki Banis from the band Walk the Earth, and it's called Purpose. So I'm just going to start the show with that, and then we'll kind of go from there. But so it says, do not forget who you are and where you come from. You are made of the brightest stars and the widest oceans. You are made of the highest mountains and the tallest trees. You are made of magic and dreams and wishes and light. You have heroes, warriors, kings, queens, gods and goddesses flowing through your veins. You come from infinite possibilities and incredible odds. You are here for a reason. And that's from Nikki Banis of Walk the Earth. And so for our audience members who may not know about the band, it's a very unique group from Canada, from Burlington, Ontario. They were sort of an independent pop band, and they were very innovative. If you have an opportunity to check out some of their videos, they use things that really aren't instruments, and they create amazing vocal harmonies, and they blend sort of like folk pop and reggae all together. And they came into the limelight with a song that they covered using 5 people on one guitar. The song was Somebody That I Used to Know. And when I started looking at this, and I was thinking about how it relates to our topic, Michael, of self-love and being enough and really knowing the essential self, I think that it really was a really great metaphor for how we as individuals have our own harmony and vibration, but that when we come together in connection, when you know your part and who you truly are, who your pure being is, it really harmonizes with life. And so that's where I thought we would start the show today. And I'm going to just would love to hear your thoughts about her poem, Purpose, and what your thoughts are on our own individual vibration and how we evolve through that.
Thank you. My take, it's interesting. I guess I can't speak for somebody else. However, I know that in terms of my purpose, something I have, and still at 64, searching for the actual essence of the life purpose that I'm here for, to successfully master whatever it is that I'm supposed to do here. When I look back over my life, as I encourage all of our listeners to do as well, you can kind of see those places where you've had these pivots. And I was thinking about the other day during my walk, how I came to such a high level of self-love. And because it's your greatest challenge is to love yourself, because there's so many outside forces and influences that are telling you that you're not enough, that you're not good enough. So it's always the challenge. And it made me turn something on. It was a piece that I know I forwarded to you from Brian Scott. It was a video. He was reading a chapter out of Dr. Joseph Murphy's book about the power of suggestion and how, and I found it so cool that Murphy was talking about, Dr. Murphy, that we are just simply bombarded by all these suggestions, and our subconscious mind doesn't do our thinking. It basically is where we record everything. If your conscious mind says "I love you," that will be imprinted. If you say "I love you" to yourself, you're imprinting that on your subconscious mind. If you say, I hate you, that's what you're imprinting on your subconscious mind. So it's just a recorder that will play back whatever it is you give it. And if you engage in things that involve a lot of lower frequencies that lead to you vibrating lower frequencies, then those low frequencies will be imprinted on your subconscious, the fear, the worry, the anxiety. And for me, the turning point, at some particular point, I can't point the exact time frame. However, I started filtering out those things that didn't make me feel good when I exposed myself to them. Mm-hmm. You know, we want to be, we want to love ourselves. We just, in my view, no one ever teaches you how. You know, I mean, really, that's what it boils down to. You're thrust into this life, all kinds of influences coming at you left and right since the day you were born. And, you know, and some of us don't even get love from our parents. We don't really know what love is, you know. And I tell people all the time that the love we have, you know, everybody wants love. And I said last week, we come from love. We seek a depth of love our entire lives. Whether we realize it or not, we're seeking a depth of love. We're seeking that acknowledgement from other people. And then we return to love. And we're talking about a deep, unconditional, unabiding love. And wouldn't it be great to experience that now? Well, we can. And this is what our shows are really about. And what Dr. Joseph Murphy was talking about is that in order to get to the essence of the love you have for yourself, you have to clear out all this stuff, all these suggestions, i.e., like, you're not good enough, you'll never succeed at that, this isn't something that I think you'll be good at. Other people have told you these things. They don't even know who you are. You know, in many cases, you don't even know the essence of who you are yet. It's a journey of self-discovery. And we have to put ourselves in a position where we can discover our essence, discover our talents and our gifts, and have some success with them, and translate that success into, make that success a conduit that can help us tap deeper into the love we have for ourselves. And I obviously, you know, I play the drums. I've talked about it many times. And when I started playing at 7 years of age, and I recognized I had a knack for it, I knew that I could always go to playing the drums when I needed to ground myself. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's another thing that nobody ever teaches you how to do. How do you ground yourself? I talk about it in my books. Zero Verse, I talked about it. How do you ground yourself? How do you tap into who you are, what you are good at, what makes you feel good about yourself, what brings you, what you do for yourself that brings you joy. And these things, when you tap into those things and you feel them deeply, you then can harness, you can imprint that on your subconscious by also saying and thinking, I love me. I love who I am. I love this about me. I love that I can do this, right? All these things, when you tap into it and you say that and you imprint that on your subconscious, and then you develop a filter of the ability to reason consciously from the perspective of understanding and being able to see and recognize when outside suggestions, other people's suggestions, advertising suggestions, social media suggestions, whatever it is that's coming at you, recognizing when it is harmful to your own self-loving well-being. And that is one of the major keys. You can love yourself like crazy until someone you respect and love as well, have a depth of love for yourself, tells you something that is incongruent with self-love, incongruent with how you feel about yourself. You don't know why they do it. It might be out of spite. You might have said something and they took it the wrong way, and now they're saying something to you that is people would judge as hurtful, right? And if you accept that as the truth, then it diminishes the love you have for yourself. And we have to be ever mindful and aware of these circumstances out there. We're here to develop this depth of love for ourselves. And part of that is making sure that you're not shooting yourself in the foot by being, by letting your subconscious be so suggestible. That really is what Dr. Murphy was saying. And it was a brilliant conversation he had. I think it went off about 45 minutes.
Oh my
45,
gosh, it was
50
amazing.
minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's so many nuggets of gold in there.
Yeah, I'll try to post a link to it so that our audience, that if you can find the time to listen to it, it is well worth it.
Oh yeah,
there's so much to unpack.
It's true. There's a lot to unpack in it. A lot of cool nuggets of things that are relative to this. However, if you want to love yourself, you have to make sure that you're not only doing things that you enjoy, that bring you enthusiasm, that help you tap into the love for yourself based on what you're good at. Tap into things you can do successfully, but you have to again create that filter and a suit of armor almost to just deflect all of the stuff out there that is seeking to tell you otherwise, that you're not good enough, that you're never going to be enough if you don't have this thing, if you don't do that thing, if you don't. If my mother, the thought virus I had from she inadvertently gave me back when I dropped out of college after 2.5 years, she said, I don't know if you're going to be as successful as you want to be without a college degree. And I was like,
interesting.
Huh? Yeah. I faced that. And then when I got the job of a lifetime, that always, I didn't realize how that had imprinted, how I had accepted that, imprinted that on my subconscious mind, and it impacted how I felt about myself as I was pursuing the success in my life that I knew I deserved. And I got the opportunity of a lifetime in terms of a profession, and I struggled for about 1.5 to 2 years. I struggled with myself and my own concept of success because I was in the room doing the same thing with people who had masters and PhDs, right? So, that can be kind of intimidating when you've got a thought virus operating within you that says, I don't know if you're going to be successful if you have a college degree, right?
It's so much, I get it, Michael. I mean, I went to college, but what's so interesting is, and I want to share this with you because it is so much in alignment with what you're saying. So I was on a trajectory to be going pre-med, right? My father got cancer my junior year of college. I had to graduate in 4 years to get out because we had a family business I needed help, and I didn't have the luxury of doing whatever I needed to do. So I switched my major into arts and sciences degree, graduated, and we had a printing company. I started doing work on the side. I started doing freelance design work. I always liked to do art. It wasn't what I went to school for. And then I ended up working for a company as in that regards, and I started creating and working on the computer and generating things. And I would go to these events, and there were all of these people who had degrees in art and graphic design. And I saw myself as less than, because that was not what my degree was in. I felt like a fraud. I felt like a phony. Here I am. I don't have this magical piece of paper that says I can create art and do it well and whatnot. And so I mean, and it took me a long time to realize that guess what? I was enough. I was enough that I could produce things that were beautiful and in alignment and within the layout principles of what I perceived as right. And I was all self-taught on my programs and everything else. And It's a very interesting. I guess it's a conditioning and a belief system. So I really appreciate you sharing that, because
you too.
I wonder how many other people who are in the same on the same trajectory, where they are doing something that they weren't trained for, but they find they have a talent or a gift for it, and maybe they suppress it. Maybe there's some people who have left what they would have been really good at because there was some thought virus that they couldn't do it.
Yeah, that
really,
they got hung up in. Yeah, they started listening. Their subconscious was driving their conscious ability. Love that story, by the way, about you, and thank you for being so vulnerable today and telling it. We were on the same page. You know, there's a reason why we are doing this show together, because we have this sort of this parallel universe that we've been operating in for our entire lives. And what's interesting is that I want to point out to our audience is that it's not just, it could be school. It could also be the fact that, I play music, but I don't read music. I started to read music back when I started to play. However, because we moved around so much, I basically lost touch with that ability. And because it was at an impressionable time in my beginning. So think about it for a second. I can sit down and play with anybody. However, I don't read music. I know pianists that don't read music. I know one of the best guitar players in this town, a fabulous musician, doesn't read music. Right? He can play anything he hears. He just doesn't read music.
What a gift.
He understands. He can dance around a song like nobody's business. Doesn't read music. Lionel Richie doesn't read music.
Wow,
it's amazing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, one of the top hit writers. Oh yeah, he doesn't read music. Right? Some of the most amazing people amazing musicians. I have a friend who's the bass player from Katrina and the Waves. Doesn't read music. And it's interesting how he knows music. He knows keys and other things and tempos and stuff like that. But if you put a piece of sheet music in front of him, he's lost. Right? So what's interesting is that we can have talents and gifts that we can tap into. Understanding the fact that did it prevent Lionel Richie from being one of the greatest songwriters of all time? No,
absolutely
not. If I had enough time to think about it, I could come up with a dozen more people who were brilliant brilliant singers, brilliant songwriters, people. Here's something really interesting. This is really cool. One of the absolute top and most sought after music producers in the world, who's worked with, oh my gosh, Johnny Cash through every genre of music, every A-list musician and singer, songwriter, number one top hit maker. This guy, you look at him, he looks like a guru. Long silver hair, in a kind of scraggly all over with a beard, and he sits in the studio in yoga style and sits on a few pillows and listens. And it was interesting because he was in an interview last week with somebody from CBS who said, "What is it about you?" He said, "Do you read music?" He says, "No." "Do you play an instrument?" "No." "Do you write music?" I wouldn't know how to write a song. I wouldn't know how to do any of that. I wouldn't know. I don't know anything about it. Do you understand how to work a soundboard as an engineer? No, I have no clue. He doesn't know anything about music, and he says, "So what makes you so special in your eyes?" And he says, "I can feel what I'm hearing. I can feel."
There you go.
And I basically, he closes his eyes and he listens, and he knows what makes him feel good. And so he suggests various things.
I was going to say, was that Rick Rubin by any chance?
Let me look him up. I have to see. Hold on. I have to see.
Yeah, please.
Did you see something on him?
I did. I saw him on the show with Rich Roll, and I was just blown away.
He's kind of a heavy set guy. long gray hair. Looks like a hippie.
Yeah, he does.
Looks like
yeah,
hippie.
And he's worked with some amazing people. And actually, that's one of the things he said.
That is him.
He said that his weight he always saw as an obstacle. He was always self-conscious. Now here's somebody that's so incredibly successful and able to bring the jewels, treasures out of these musicians. And really showcase. He does everything very minimally. He doesn't really add. Right. He allows their brilliance to shine through. I was just blown away by it. Really blown away by it. It was amazing.
The way thank you so much for bringing up his name. I looked him up. That is exactly what I'm talking about. It is what is amazing is his story of how he does what he does, and it brings up the connection between feeling and the frequencies that you can resonate at, up, higher, lower, whatever. We have to develop. Each of us has to develop a keen sense of how we feel in any given moment. I know people that are like freight trains through an event. They don't have no clue how they feel. They're just reacting, right? They're just reacting, and generally reacting with lower frequencies. Things are happening in their life, and you can ask them, "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know. I know how you feel about it." You're resonating at with fear, worry, anger, hate, jealousy. You're resonating all these lower frequencies. And here's something really interesting that Dr. Joseph Murphy said, which I found was so profound, that when you operate at lower frequencies, anxiety, when you're anxious about things, when you're fearful, when you're worried or frustrated or just plain angry, emotionally upset, that is when you're most suggestive. That is when suggestion. That's when you are most likely to take on a thought virus, to accept someone's suggestion. Someone could say something, and you, oh yeah, right. You all of a sudden you imprint it with a lot of emotion on your subconscious. That is when you're most impressionable. When you are operating at lower frequencies. When you're at high frequencies of happiness and love and peace and harmony and joy, you're less susceptible to suggestion. Really, really interesting. And so how do we feel? How do we feel in any given moment? I know that I, over time, had developed this really keen sense of understanding what I was feeling in any moment. When someone said something and I got, you get that tightness, something that maybe was out of sorts, and you get a tightness in your solar plexus, kind of like, oh, you get that, right? And you can kind of feel it in your gut, like something's wrong here. I took this the wrong way, or somebody said something. And I think of Terry Cole Whitaker's "What You Think of Me Is None of My Business." We in today's world, our self-love is always under attack. That's the way I would put it. It's always under attack by outside influences and people who don't really know who we are. Think about the internet. Think about social media. People will say something to you, cyberbullying, all that. That's all from people who don't know you. They don't know your essence. They've never met you. Yet, this is the craziness of it. We accept what they say as truth. When they've never met us. They've never spent an iota of seconds with us. And this is what's crazy. This is how our self-love is always under attack. I would, in the morning, by the way, when I started my career 38 years ago, one of the ways that I was able to turn that thought virus around and kind of eject it, from my being,
right,
is by, pardon?
No, I said I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I started looking around at the people I was working with that had masters and PhDs, and I went to refocus on what my strengths were. My strengths were relational connection, the ability to sense and gauge how other people felt. I was doing my business over the phone, and I discovered that I had a knack for instantaneously gauging where the other person was coming from, how they felt. I could tell in a second if I interrupted them doing something, whether or not they were happy, sad, whether they were out of sort, depressed about something, whether they were joyful. I could tell instantaneously. I could sense it. And that was one of my greatest strengths because I could run with that. I could actually connect with them by understanding how they felt. And I'm talking about in seconds, right? Just when they say hello, I could tell. I could tell right then and there. It didn't get over my head. It went right into me, and I know. So relational connection was one of my strengths. You've heard about the term street smarts, okay? I had been in sales for a long time, and so I knew how to connect with people. I knew that once I did, I know who I am. I am a persuader. I'm somebody who is an influencer. That is my makeup. That's my personality profile, as it were. And I figured that out early on. I just didn't connect it. I was so disconnected from it because of the room I was in with a bunch of people, the office I was in with a bunch of people. And so I went back to my strengths, and I started using my strengths. I started tapping into my strengths. And those strengths were far and above, beyond many of the other people who were in the room who had degrees. They had degrees, but they weren't in touch with their own feelings or how other people felt. They weren't in touch with how to connect with people instantaneously. They had no skill in doing it because they came from book smarts. Maybe they came directly from university, or they came from an educational background. And they were brainiacs. They were in their head instead of their heart. That was the difference. And I quickly determined that. And I said, I could do this. And then every morning I started getting up and looking myself in the mirror as I was getting dressed and said, I love you and you can do anything.
Oh, that's
I love
beautiful.
you and you can do anything.
Love it.
Yeah. I'd look myself and I would ramp it up. I would get really, I'd go like, I love you and you can do anything. I'd take it to another level from an emotional. I just kept ramping it up, ratcheting it up. The emotion and the feeling. And by the time I walked out of my house, I was like, yeah, I'm into this. I can do anything. I put my mind to. I can do anything. And I love me, and I know I am successful. It's kind of like before the success occurs, you have to be that success. And so that's what I did. And it was awesome. And I do the same thing when I sit down and I play the drums with somebody who's accomplished as a musician. I can feel the music, kind of like Rip Rubin does. Like I can feel it. I can close my eyes and I can feel it, and I know where to come in, where to stop, and I can gauge the flow of the music. I have that gift, and so we all have to do this. We all have to determine where our strengths and gifts lie, and focus on them. Focus on those. Let those build us up. Let those build the love inside us for ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And I think a lot of it, too, is almost a remembrance of who you are, who this being, who this amazing soul is. One of the teachers I had, and I tell people all the time, I'm getting better and better at remembering the things that I forgot. And so if you are getting better and better at remembering the things that you forgot as a soul coming into this world, then as you start to reconnect with your wholeness and return to harmony in an effort to thrive, you are going to discover your gifts and your talents. And really, I think that's what a lot of it is all about, and being authentic. And I know we use that word a lot about what authenticity is, but it's really, Shakespeare said, to thine own self be true. And knowing that somewhere in you is this nugget, this feeling, and what's right always feels good. I don't care. You can sit there and tell me, X, Y, Z, and I'm going to feel it in my gut, and I'm going, not so much, not for me. Maybe it's true for you, but if somebody says, oh, you have to try this, or you have to do this, and I feel it, and I ask myself, is this for me? And sometimes I get a big no, and I have to know when to to bow out. There was a time in my life that it was easy to say yes, and I would find myself doing things that were really not in alignment with who I was. And I think we all go through that as part of where we learn to trust ourselves on this journey through life. And I think that the most important thing to remember is each one of us have our own unique path, and really just to be the best version of yourself every day. And for me, and it's that I try to let that, I'm doing my best. And if I truly, in my heart, know that I did my best today, I can't beat myself up for whatever happened. Yeah. There's going to be challenges, whatever it is. I know that I did the best that I could do. And oftentimes what will happen, I mean, maybe it might not be 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever, I'll look back and I'll be like, oh, my God, I'm so glad that happened. Because that took me, I learned so many things, and I'm able to share this with other people, and it brought me to exactly where I'm at right now. And I think that's what the awareness of who you are, and that falling in love with yourself and who it is that you are in this journey of life. And I would encourage everybody every morning, just be the best version of yourself that you can be, and honor your gifts and your talents, and discover. I mean, there are certain things, that you will find that you have more, you're drawn to. And a lot of times some things are scary. I mean, I remember I have these amazing friends that moved here from Japan, and they used to work with clay in their house, and they've learned this very unique form of Japanese ceramics, and they would invite me over, and I'd watch them play with the clay, and they're like, here's a lump of clay. And I was like, well, I don't know how to do that. And they said, oh, just play with it and ask the clay what it wants to be. And I would just mold it and make sure I would get all the bubbles out. And the first thing that my clay wanted to be was this little lion that I made, and I painted it. And it, it was so joyful.
I love it.
To see it, and what it was really, it was about it becoming, and it just unfolded that way. I don't know how to explain it any other way, but if you could use that as a metaphor for your life, you don't have to know what you want it to be. You mold it, you shape it, you pull things off, you put things in. This no longer serves me. I don't need this, and use whatever it is that you need to be whole, I guess, is in a nutshell. That's what I would say.
Well said.
Thank you.
We don't, it is, you bring up a very good point about you are like a piece of clay. You're molding yourself as you go through life and shaping yourself. And every experience you have becomes something that it shapes you. And the key then is to understand the one inalienable fact that you are the one shaping you. You want to be the one shaping you, not somebody else or something else. There are people who love themselves because of what they're doing, what their identity is at the time, and then when that identity no longer exists, if you've based your self-love on the fact that you were the best gymnast in the world, and all of a sudden now you're no longer being a gymnast, you've retired from that. What do? How do you refer to yourself? How do you think about yourself? And a lot of from people who've been at the peak of their profession have a challenge in understanding who they are when they're no longer doing it. The Michael Phelps had this issue, went into a deep depression from once he won all the gold medals anybody could win historically, and a record that will stand in infamy. The fact that he was no longer swimming, that had been his identity since he was a very young kid. That's who he was. That was the avatar that he was. And all of a sudden he was no longer that avatar. He was just a common citizen and didn't know how to deal with it. And the major question that I wonder is, had he ever tapped into the love he has for himself as just a human being? Had he been so focused on being the best that and listening to everybody tell him he was the best and walking that line, as many, of course, child actors do, it makes it a challenge. I'm going to shift to the acting thing because my brother is an actor and probably has one of the most clear heads on his shoulders of anybody that I know. However, and he's been doing it since 1981, and I've come across people who identified them who when you're an actor and you're in a successful role, be it a play, you're an actor in theater, actor in movies, television, whatever. Everybody, you're surrounded by people who always tell you yes. No, nobody will tell you no because they don't want to hurt your feelings, right? Mm-hmm. And so you get a real warped sense of reality. And reality is you're just a human being working and evolving who you are, just like everybody else, right? And so when your self-love comes from outside sources, people who tell you you're great, regardless of what job you did. Everything was excellent. Oh, it was awesome. That was amazing, right? That's all you hear. And then all of a sudden that stops. What do you do? Because you've never had the contrast. You've never had a contrast of, well, that wasn't really that good. Why don't we work it again? Because when you get to a certain level and you're getting paid and you're the co-star or the star of something, it's a challenge. It's a challenge because you always get positive feedback. Everybody loves you. The question is, do you love yourself? And so there's this conflict that rages on inside of many people in my brother's profession. The conflict is self-love versus, other people's love. And if other people don't keep, you get addicted to other people's love, other people's kindness, other people's, yes, and acknowledgement, let's say, which is why I tell people, other people's acknowledgement is awesome. However, what you really want is the depth of your own acknowledgement of who you are, of yourself, that you exist, that you are enough, that you can do anything. You set your mind to, that you are happy because you engage. You say you're happy. Number one, it's counterintuitive to say I'm unhappy because I am. Those two words are the most powerful words you could ever say when it comes to your own inner conversation. They state who you are in the present moment. And when you say I am this or I am that, that is what your self-conscious believes. You're saying it consciously, which is why I stood in front of the mirror and I said that. I was programming my self-consciousness, my subconsciousness for success. That's what I was doing. I love you. You can do anything. I can do anything. I am this. I am that. I'd get in my car and start yelling at myself at the top of the lungs how great I was, that I could do anything, that I could do this, that I am successful, that I am. Because you don't have a cheerleading squad. You're not born with a cheerleading squad. You are your own cheerleading squad. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. There's a purpose behind it. There's a magic behind it. And we are all, as we're all born from love, we're just kind of feeling our way around, right? Feeling our way around. And when you become alert and aware of the fact that you're not quite loving of yourself, and all the people I've ever come across who have been addicted to substances, drank too much, whatever it was, I sensed that self-love was lacking. And I realized I had a client who was an alcoholic, and she lacked self-love. I don't know. I didn't go into how or why or whatever, but that's what she lacked. She lacked the love of self, a deep love of self. Beyond her disease, she lacked the love of self. And sometimes that's just the thought virus you can't shake because it came from somebody who was so important to you, and it's so imprinted your subconscious that you just have difficulty finding the greatest challenge of your life to get beyond it, to love who you are, to love you for you. It's crazy, but that's kind of the way it works. And for those who are listening, I can tell you one thing. There was a psychologist who I listened to one day. It was on NPR years ago, decades ago. And she worked with people with regard to self-love. And the interview asked her, how many people, she said, the first thing I do when I have a new patient, in the first meeting, I have them stand in front of the mirror and say, I love you. And he said, so how many people do it? He says, statistically, 92% of the people that have come into my office can't do it.
Right, I understand that.
Can't stand in front of a mirror, look themselves in the eye and say, I love you. They have a problem with it. And that's where she begins. That's how she understands what work she needs to do.
That's powerful.
It is seriously powerful, isn't it? You know, I mean, you have some ways to go on your journey of self-love when that is an issue. Beyond that, if that's not an issue, then you can work on the higher levels of evolution for yourself, which is, again, discovering what your gifts are, your talents are, and working with those, and rearranging your life so that you engage more of your talents in what you're doing, the gifts you have. Show me somebody who's happy beyond belief, and I'll tell you, I'll show you somebody who not only has a great inner conversation, they can sit around and say, I love you, I care about you. They also they have a great filter. They don't let other people, they're in touch with their sovereignty, is I guess what I want to say. They control what they think about themselves. They don't let other people tell them, dictate to them how they should feel or how they should think. They have a very strong center, so to speak. And that is where we all want to be. I've gotten there through years of trial and error, understanding, seeking higher awareness, a lot of introspection for myself, because I ask myself, why do you feel that way? If I feel off of it, I say, whoa, let's back up here. Let's zoom out and say, why do I feel that way? Somebody said something to me that I didn't like. Okay, what was it? What was the nature of it? What does it really mean to me? Is it something that isn't going to matter in 24 hours? Am I allowing someone to make me feel this uncomfortable? That's the question I ask myself. Am I letting somebody else, I'm allowing someone else to do that to me? And I'm going like, why? How important is it that I have this person's attention, their acknowledgement? How important is that? I want to be the acknowledger of myself first. I come first in this life from a perspective of love, because I understand that when I love myself, I project that out to others, and that's what they pick up on. And you know that. We do that. When we go out, we see people, we connect with people on a daily basis that we don't know. We have to come from a love. And you're smiling, your demeanor, your happiness, your understanding that you're the one in charge. You're the one behind the wheel. You're the one who's always had your hand on the rudder since you were born, not somebody else guiding your life somewhere. I can use a dozen analogies about that. However, it still means the same thing, that you've always had the wheel in front of you, and your hands are on it sometimes, and sometimes you take your hands off the wheel and let other people drive your life. Why is what I say. Why would you do that? Why would you let somebody else dictate to you how you should feel, what you should think, where you should go? Have the ability to reason it out. All that is important for self-love, because we have to build up let's put it this way. Let's call it a muscle. Self-love is a muscle we have to work on. We have to build it up, right? We have to build up our own self-love to make us impervious to the suggestions of other people and other institutions. There are dozens and not dozens. There are millions of stories about people who've been told, nah, you can't do that. Doctors, we talked about it a couple of episodes ago. Doctors telling a patient, no, I don't think you've got about 6 months to live. And if you allow that to imprint on your subconscious, that in other words, if you say, I am going to die, once you say that, then your whole physicality, your whole psychology, your whole, mind, body, and spirit starts to shut down because that's what you've told it to do. That's what you've told it to do. And other people will say, I'm living. I am living. I am living. I am beating this. They fortify themselves. They put themselves on a different journey, a different path, because that's what they told themselves they are doing. All of a sudden your body goes, wait a minute, hold on a second. Wait, I feel a little off, but hey, I'm moving through this thing because you've told your body we're moving through this. And miracles happen. People call, oh, it's a miracle. Really? If I start to interview that person, I bet you the first thing we do is we find out. I listen to what they say and how their self-talk was so purposeful and intentional about what they were going to accomplish. And they told themselves they were going to succeed. It's pretty amazing. We've got all kinds of examples of it.
Yeah.
But that's to me where, self-love the muscle.
I was going to say, I'm glad you bring up the analogy of driving, because there's a saying about filling up your own tank of self-love first. And I really like that, because
I love that.
if you are not in alignment with who you are and really the divine expression of who you are and your gifts, it's very hard. I mean, I think there's a lot of us who do continually give to others, but we don't afford ourselves that same courtesy. We're not kind. We're not loving. We are not forgiving of ourselves. And I think a lot of times, when you start to sort of make peace with yourself and the perceived imperfections that you have, and they really are, they are perceived imperfections, and you do something or you give love, and maybe it's not noticed or appreciated, and then that makes you feel like, oh, you know what, I'm not enough. It wasn't enough. I've got to keep giving more. And we all know people in our lives that do that. And I think when you start recognizing that you are here on this planet with a very important purpose, and I think, Michael, I read you this before the show, and I'm actually going to post on Instagram. I think I'd love to read it. It's from Buddha, and it's a quote, and it says, you can search throughout the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself, and that person is not to be found anywhere. You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. And when I read that, and I read it over and over to myself, and I think that when you sort of say, I am, therefore I am, and really you start to align with that, you do start to see things transform. And I think a lot of it has to do, again, with showing up. So I had an event this weekend. It was a healing event, and I closed my practice. I still see people on occasion, and I've sort of redefined what I want to do. And somebody, the gentleman who's organizing, asked me if I wanted to be a part of this healing fair. And I thought, what, sure, I haven't done anything in a while. Well, as it was, the week evolved in such that I didn't have any time to prepare. And I was doing so many things for so many people, and it was a really good lesson in loving myself. So the morning of the event, I thought to myself, you know what, I am not really prepared. I have all these things. I can throw something together. I don't think I'm going to go. And I thought I was going to call and bow out. And then I thought, you know what? Come on, LeRose, get your act together. You can do this. And I did. I put my tablecloth in. I put my materials in. I was like, okay, I'll take this. I'll put this on my table. I'll put that on my table and do this. I had my business cards, because actually my intention was to speak about this podcast and to educate and whatnot. And I'll tell you, I got there 15 minutes before it started. I set everything up, and I was so glad that I went. It was such a lovely event. I met the most amazing people, and it wasn't about making money or doing this or doing that. It was about me doing the best that I could with what I had, and it was wonderful. And they're going to do another event in February, and the gentleman who organized asked it, and I said, I absolutely would love to be a part of it. And what was so interesting is I connected with an individual that was at the event, and I said to her I wasn't going to do this, and she said, I wasn't going to do this either. She said, this isn't what I do. I said, this isn't what I do. And I said, but I think I was supposed to meet you. And she said, I think I was supposed to meet you too. And, and that's really, I love it. That's what it's all about. It's that alignment and that connection and showing up. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Michael.
My thought number one is that you had the awareness to come to that notion. Now, that being there's always a higher purpose for why we are where we are. And I tell people this all the time. And I have to, I remember it myself, and I call it the magic of life. The magic of life and relational connection is that it doesn't matter where you are. You could be standing in line at the bank. It's not by accident. It's not by accident. Sure, you're thinking, oh, I got to come here, I got to make this deposit, blah, 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 right? I'm just doing this 3D rote thing I do all the time. I'm hanging out in the 3D world. I'm standing in a queue. And I don't like standing in queues. And instead of being focused on the fact that you're in a queue and you don't want to be in a queue and you'd rather be doing something else, getting yourself all into the lower frequencies of aggravation and frustration and fear that you won't accomplish what you want to accomplish that day, you have to let all that go. Remember, number one, that there are no accidents, there are no coincidences, and you're there for a reason. The universe has placed you wherever you are for a reason. And I am the one that chooses to focus on the reason instead of that I'm in a queue that's going to be, I was at the post office today. The first thing I did in the morning was one postal person working behind the desk, and there were 15 of us in line. And I'm going like, oh, my gosh. I knew it was going to be like that. So I just sat there, and I was listening to something very uplifting, not the Sophagio thing, music, but I was listening to something else that was very uplifting. And the first thing I said to myself is, okay, this is some great time for me to educate myself, to enlighten myself. And enlightenment is the highest frequency that you can operate in as far as frequencies go. Enlightenment is number one because it leads to so many other things. It's part of the journey. And so it's what's interesting about what you said is that you were alert, you were aware, and it's so amazing when that happens. When you turn around to the person behind you and don't say something negative, but say something positive. And then they smile. And then maybe perhaps they say something to you, and you might find out that they're out of sorts, and you can say your acknowledgement is all they need at that particular moment. Maybe perhaps something beyond that to help them move in a different direction, to shift their thinking or their feelings at that particular moment. There are many, many, many people who are becoming aware and alert to the fact that they are in control of their own lives, and many of them just don't know it. And those that have awakened to that realization that they're in charge, that they're the ones who can put their hands on the wheel and go wherever they want to go and don't have to listen to what other people think they should do or where they should go. Those people are looking for help. Hopefully they're listening to the show and they're getting some gold nuggets that they can enrich their life with beyond the show, because that's what we ask people to do, is to just take what you can take to use in your life right now and let the rest sit in your memory banks and pull it out when you get ready, when it is appropriate, when it is time. But that is the thing. You've got to be aware that you're somewhere for a reason. Life becomes much more interesting and adventurous when you do that.
Right. And it would have been easy for me to go back to bed and blow it off, but that's not my agreement with myself. And I have to really, if I'm going to live and truly be authentic and stand in my truth and really, I think, be an exemplifier whatever that is. Even for myself, I'm an exemplifier for myself, and I recognize it, and I'm not even sure who said it, that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And I love that. I love that it's happening for me. So no matter what it was, any of the challenges, even, and who knows, maybe I wasn't supposed to be over-prepared for this event, which was absolutely great. I didn't have all of these brochures or anything else. It was me. It was me. Authentically, it was just me.
Exactly.
I had to show up, and I had to be there. And I think that that's really what it is. And it's standing in the grace. My grandmother's name was Grace, and I said, if I could be like my grandma Grace, my life would be complete, because she was such a fine person. She never said an unkind word about anybody. She opened her heart to everybody. I just, I think about that, and every time I hear that word grace, and I think really, it's really about embracing your truth. And and whether it's like, take a deep breath, okay, here we go again, whatever that is, and it's okay to say, like, I'm not perfect. I'm not, but guess what? I care about myself enough, and I love myself, and I'm going to be open to the experience. And that's opening to all of the infinite possibilities that are yet to evolve. And I think that when you connect with your heart and sort of allow that river of whatever it is to flow, it really, that's when the magic happens, and magnificence
that is so true.
follows.
And you've got lots of magic. You've got lots of magic. Yeah, you got lots of magic. I'm serious. You do. You got lots of magic, and each of us has to find the magic in ourselves. It's something that we should all spend some time focusing on. We get caught up in life. This is the biggest challenge for us right now. It used to be that one person could lead the household financially, and the others, now that's not the case. Now it takes two people. It's very, very, very challenging from an expense perspective to live in most of these cities. You have to leave and go find some place that you can afford to live in and have a higher quality of life. So if you want to live in a place where there's lots of people, it's going to be very expensive to live there. And so what suffers? Self-love doesn't have to suffer if that is an intention and a focus that you have for yourself. It doesn't have to suffer. Your outside circumstances don't define who you are. If you've chosen to be in a big, busy city, New York, Atlanta, L.A., San Francisco, blah, 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 it goes on. Tampa, Orlando, Miami. I mean, you can see that there are a lot of people looking to get ahead. There's a lot to do. You can discover who you are much more easily in a big city because there's so many more things to take advantage of. Art classes, and you can go to workshops and seminars, and you can find the music that you want to find. You can find a lot of things, plays, and there are acting and theater, and there's things that you can do that involve discovering who you are in a big city. And if you focus on that instead of the stress related to living in a big city, things change almost instantaneously. But let's believe people with this today. I would say set the intention. Set self-love as one of your highest intentions, and act accordingly. Think and act accordingly. That would be my suggestion. Number one, you got to have the intention to be self-loving. You have to make that a high priority for you, and then let everything branch out from there. In other words, your inner conversation, your language is one of the branches. Your actions are one of the branches. How you deal with experiences, that's another branch. There's all these little branches that make up your own little tree, but it starts with your own intention to be self-loving. We could talk about those other branches in our coming episodes.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Michael. I'm so honored to be with you, and I just want to say one thing. I love you, and you can do anything. I love you, and you can do anything. I love you, and you can do anything. That's right, baby. Thank you for that, Michael.
Say it 100 times.
And so it is.
Thank you. Thank you.